Greetings, people of Earth. Welcome back. My name is Jax, and today we are going to dive into the Tao Te Ching. This is a collection of verses surmised to have been collected by someone named Lao Tzu, meaning old master or old boy, depending on your translation. Historical scholars sort of wonder whether Lao Tzu actually existed or if it is a collection of phrases and wisdom from Chinese philosophy and that kind of area. Whether he existed or not, the Tao Te Ching remains one of the most seminal and groundbreaking pieces of philosophy, examining why we are here, what we are meant to do here, how to navigate life. It is a set of philosophical principles about how to engage with the universe and the world in general. Dao means sort of the way and sort of the process or the idea, the flow. It's sort of translated in many different ways. But this is the first episode. If you're watching this in sequential order on the playlist, this is the first episode, so we're going to dive into it. I am going to be using a translation done by, the name escapes me, James Trapp is the translator. He has a degree from the University of London, specializing in Chinese and the Bronze Age art and archaeology and Buddhist sculpture. Daoism is a formal religion, but it's also a philosophy and a set of principles and practices. I practice the philosophical version of this. I don't subscribe to the religious ideas of Daoism or the deities and the ritualistic worship. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the philosophy and basically the ways of doing it. How these videos are going to work, for anybody who is new, is we're going to go through a chapter each video and explore the concepts, the themes, the understanding, how I interpret it, how the translator interprets it. You will quickly learn that the Tao Te Ching is probably the most translated book in the world. What I mean by that is that every single translation of the Tao Te Ching is slightly different. It has different emphasis. It has different ideas and principles. So it can kind of help to look at different versions and different translations. Like I said, this is the version I will be using. If you look up any of these verses or chapters, you might find things phrased differently. Sometimes the chapters have completely different meanings, which is kind of interesting, and yet the meaning is usually still somewhat there, and I think it's interpretable by anybody. And sometimes you will read a verse in the Tao Te Ching and you will think, man, I don't quite understand this. And then you'll look at a different translation of the same verse and it'll just click with you. And I found that to be incredibly helpful. This translation is probably my favorite, but there are verses in it that I don't particularly vibe with or like. And so sometimes I use other versions, but basically that's how it's going to work. I'm going to quickly give, as this is the first formal episode of this series, going to give you a bit of a rundown of these things. I've told you that Lao Tzu is sort of this wise ancient master, and some historians sort of speculate if he even existed at all. I think that's kind of irrelevant. I think a lot of us like to put people on pedestals, and we like to personify and make these figures in history far more important than they actually were, when the whole point of Daoism is to find what works for you and to flow through life, to go the way that works best, to not try and fight or disagree with the way the universe is going, but to make changes and to lead your life in a positive and constructive way. At least that's my interpretation of it. So that is essentially what it is. If you're going to ask me what the Tao is, that's a deeper question that is quite difficult to answer. Everybody has a different perspective on what the Tao is. I think of it as the path of the universe, or if you imagine a river going through a forest, it bends and it moves across. It goes over rocks and cuts through valleys, and it does all of these things. And it's just the natural path. It's the flow of least resistance. And the river has created a whole ecosystem around it, and the trees have come up, the animals come to it for water, animals live in it, like the fish and the bugs and the birds, and it's something you can't really fight. You can't really change without great effort, and it will still be a river by the end. And I think the most important part is the river was here before we showed up, and it will be here long after we are gone. So that's how I envision the Tao. I think of it as these universal sort of practices and ideas about you can't change the universe, so you might as well try and flow with it and lead your life in accordance with it. And so that's kind of the idea. Several practices like meditation, mindfulness, breath work, all of these things can be very beneficial to someone who practices Taoism. The philosophy itself I find very comforting, and any good philosophy should give you a set of moral principles to live by, and I really stand by the principles of Taoism. I think it's one of those philosophies that people find great comfort and enjoyment in, and I think it's worth listening to, and it's worth learning some of it. You don't have to completely embrace these principles, but understanding them and incorporating some into your life, I think, is the most Tao thing to do, and Tao being a good thing. Sometimes Tao is just a thing. Sometimes it's not ascribed to any positive or negative trait. Sometimes people like to say the Tao just is. It is. And the final bit before I read the first chapter, and then we'll go into it, the final element that is sort of important as an introduction into Taoism is the concept of WOAY. WOAY is the idea of non-action, and I'll be talking about WOAY through this whole series, so I hope you get used to me saying it. WOAY means non-action, and the idea, I think of it as like a flow state. So if you've ever been really good at a skill, it might be baking, it might be marathon running, it could be archery, it could be swimming, it could be basketball, it could be anything. Have you ever felt in the zone, in your element? Maybe you're playing a video game, or you're writing, or you're doing something that you sort of lose yourself in, and you're sort of just existing in the moment and in the present, and it is this moment of clarity, and your brain feels very single-minded. That is WOAY, or at least that's how I think of WOAY. It's this idea of non-action, not doing. And I think the concept behind it is that in that state, in that moment when you are just existing, you aren't worried about the past or frightened about the future. You're not concerned of like external circumstances, how you might look, what you might be doing, the fact that our inevitable death is coming. You're just existing in that moment. That is what I think of when I think of WOAY and the idea of not doing or non-action. You're gonna see throughout this whole series that Taoism is very much, you might have seen it in Disney cartoons or something, where there's like an old wizened master who says, in order to go left, you must go right. In order to be alive, you must die. In order to eat, you must starve. You're gonna see a lot of that in Taoism. There is a lot of this like bipolarity of, in order to do one thing, you must do the other. In order to achieve great success, you must know great failure. There's a lot of that. There's an awful lot of this idea that actually being super angry is connected to being super happy, or being super excited is connected to being super bored. And you're going to see a lot of how the two vast opposites of something are very closely connected. Hot and cold, up and down, left and right. These concepts are all innately tied to each other, and Taoism lets us see it and appreciate those differences and see the similarities, because even though hot and cold might be totally different ideas and totally different experiences, they're still very similar. The idea of being too cold or too hot, they have very similar physiological things. We feel uncomfortable when we're too hot. We feel uncomfortable when we're too cold. We can't sleep when we're too hot. We can't sleep when we're too cold. And so it's this idea of balance and this idea of the two opposites that actually connect in the middle. And it's that middle part, that flow state, that Dao, that is where you find this like inner peace, or inner happiness. So there'll be a lot of those concepts. We'll go through them as they come to us. But the first chapter of the Tao Te Ching, and these chapters aren't long. I'll give you a little thing. One of the reasons I like this translation is it provides the traditional Chinese translation, and then it gives you the actual verse, which is down here. And that's the whole verse. That's the whole verse of chapter 1. This particular translation provides titles to these different chapters. I don't think traditionally there is a title given. So this is a translator who has given a title to these verses. I don't necessarily know that that's very helpful. I think you should be able to just figure it out on your own. But for the sake of this video, chapter 1, James Trapp has given the title, The Mystery of the Dao. So this is the first chapter of the Tao Te Ching. The Tao that we can comprehend is not the eternal and infinite Tao. The names that we give are not the eternal and infinite names. Void is how we name the origin of the cosmos. Amplitude is how we name the creation of the things that fill it. Thus, it is in void that we can contemplate the scope of the Tao, and in amplitude, its subtleties. These two have different names, but a common source, and both are mysteries. They are mystery upon mystery, gateways to the infinite, mutable of the Tao. This chapter is commonly known as sort of the name Tao is not the eternal Tao. That is sort of the main concept of this chapter. And essentially what it's trying to say is that the idea of the Tao cannot be written down. And the idea is that when you write something down, you are giving it a fixed or finite position. So when I write down my name, I'm giving myself a fixed title. You know, my name encompasses my whole existence and my whole being. And that's not quite accurate. So when I write my name down on a piece of paper, I'm not giving you the entire summary or idea of who I am. I'm just giving you my name, which is not the true version of myself, you know? I would have to show you every second of my life and my existence and my thoughts and my beliefs in order for you to even have a slight understanding of who I am. And even then, you still wouldn't have a full picture. And so what it's saying here is the idea of Tao cannot be finite written down. It cannot be given in just a short 3-letter word like Tao. So this idea is that there is a lot more behind the surface of this concept. And as we go forward, you will see that it's a complicated and it's a very intricate set of beliefs and ideas. But in the easiest, probably most incorrect way of describing the Tao, you can think of it as the universe, the energy, the flow state, the entire existence. We are all Tao. Everything you see behind me is Tao. One day it will all disappear and become new things or new energy or new particles. And the Tao is an encompassing idea of everything. And if you are a Star Wars fan, you can think of it as like the Force, you know, this ethereal, heavenly energy that encompasses all of us and this fate. If you're a Greek mythology fan, you can think of like the fates and the cutting of the string and sort of the string of time. If you're a physicist, you can think of it as the theoretical framework that sort of dictates how the universe works, the basic laws and principles, but also beyond what we understand. So there's a lot of ways that you can think of it, but it's basically, this chapter is basically preparing the reader or the new officiate of just how complicated this is and how the Tao is this vastly, infinitely complex idea that encompasses everything and nothing. And it exists and it is non-existent, and it is timeless, and it is in a very specific point in time. So that's kind of the idea. And like I said, it's this back and forth of it is everything and nothing. It is, you know, these bipolar sort of ideas and concepts. And it's, hopefully it doesn't frustrate you. I think when some people get into the Dao and Daoism, they get a little frustrated. They're like, what does this mean? Like, I feel like I'm learning less. I feel like the more I learn, the less I know. And that's exactly what it should be. I know it sounds really counterintuitive, but some people have said that Daoism is one of the only philosophies that involves you coming to the ideology and taking stuff out of your brain. You know, you're getting rid of concepts. You are becoming a lot more stupid in a way. You know, you're thinking less, you're existing more. And so this is like a difficult concept, because a lot of people think like, when you adopt a philosophy or a religion, you need to be adding things to your life. You need to be, I need to be doing this, and I need to go to church on Sunday, and I need to incorporate this, and I need to be doing this. No, no, no. Daoism is all about removing things and becoming a more simple version of what life is and existence. So it's very counterintuitive, but I think it is so fascinating, and it's why I love it so much, is that it's all about removing of obstacles, removing of blocks in your brain. And there's even a verse at some point, I don't know if it's in this translation or not, but the master, which is this concept of like a true Taoist, which doesn't actually exist, but it's used in a philosophical sense. The master is talking about, no, everyone else is a genius. I alone am stupid. Everyone else understands everything. I alone know that I understand nothing. Everyone else can speak and talk and be very eloquent. I alone am voiceless. And it's that whole concept of, you know, everyone else out there understands that, you know, they have some understanding, they have some knowledge, they have some wisdom, and only the Taoist, only the true sense of Tao understands that I know nothing, I speak nothing, I have no ability or no, like I exist, that's it. So like I said, I'm very excited for this. I think it will be a really enjoyable and fun ride. Strap in, because it's going to be a great one. I definitely recommend getting a version of the Dao. You can listen to an audiobook wherever you get your audiobooks. It only takes like 50 minutes to read the whole thing. I know this looks like a big book, but it's beautifully illustrated, so I recommend this version of it. But it doesn't take long to read. In many ways, it's nothing incredibly groundbreaking, and in other ways, it is so groundbreaking to be a little Taoist myself. So thank you guys so much for watching. Leave your comments and questions about Daoism down below. I hope you have a beautiful day. Embrace what you're doing. Live in the moment. Live in the present. You cannot change the past, and you can't control the future. So all we have is right now. And it's a gift. That's why it's called the present. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow.